Once Pierre Poilievre was kicked out, his entire caucus followed, and the Liberals call the whole thing a, quote, disgrace. We've got opposition coming up to respond to that. First, though, the government's House Leader, Steve MacKinnon, is here live in studio. Hi, Mr.
And bring in programs that support each other, support the people who are struggling. And so it's in that context, Madam Speaker, that we're very proud that
Mr. Poilievre and an expression of partisanship, and that essentially he is protecting the Prime Minister. Is he?
The Speaker applied the rules that would apply to me or any other member when using language that is unparliamentary. But you see, this is what they do, Vassy. They take extremist, in many cases violent rhetoric, they bring it into our institutions. When that is rejected, because we have rules in a democracy, then they go out and claim they are victims and outsiders and somehow unable to be heard inside of our democratic institutions. It's not normal. It's new. It's a new feature of our politics. You've seen this in other countries and other places. You certainly see it in the United States right now. But look, the opposition is not Brian Mulroney. He's not even Stephen Harper. He's promising, for example, just yesterday, he went and with a wink and a nod promised to tear up the Charter of Rights.
I mean, he didn't say that. He intimated that he would make the Constitution work for what kind of
Well, how do you make the
Constitution
work?
But he did not say, I'm going to tear it. To be fair, he's not explicitly saying, I'm going to tear up the Charter of Rights.
He said he'd use the notwithstanding clause.
He didn't even say that. He said he would make the Constitution work.
Yes, but I think we all understood what he meant. Why is he saying that? Because even Stephen Harper couldn't impose his vision of criminal justice, a failed vision of criminal justice on Canada. The Supreme Court stopped that. So now Mr. Poilievre is deciding he's going to go a lot further. In the past week, he proactively visited, with a bunch of white supremacists, people who want anarchy. They want violence against LGBTQ communities. They have advocated for gang rapes. These are people that Mr. Poilievre proactively went and visited, and it is not normal for a parliamentary democracy to not seek the truth and to seek answers about this kind of behavior.
And I understand the questions you're raising there, and there are valid questions for the Conservatives about the events you're speaking about at the border. But my question to you was about what happened in the House of Commons today. And can you be explicit? Which rule did he break? And was it simply by using the word wacko, or that he used it to characterize the Prime Minister? Because there are other parliamentarians who have used the word wacko.
You're not allowed to question the character of the Prime Minister. And I would refer you to earlier, or any other member for that matter, not just about the Prime Minister. Earlier, Mr. Poilievre actually alleged that the Prime Minister knowingly promoted policies that killed children. That, again, this is violent, extreme rhetoric, Vassy, that we have to be on the lookout for. We have to be on guard for. We cannot accept this kind of rhetoric in our democratic institutions.
So is wacko what's so egregious?
This is not an old debate about tax rates, a fair debate about policies that governments pursue or should not pursue. This is another level. This is consciously going in and breaking the rules, and hoping to be called on breaking those rules, and then to turn around and claim that one is a victim for having broken the rules and not fitting in these institutions.
Well, I'm not purporting anyone's a victim. I'm just asking for clarification, that so Canadians understand what the line is for your party and for the Speaker. And in particular, I watched the whole thing unfold. Prior to the wacko comment, I heard the Prime Minister describe the leadership of Pierre Poilievre as spineless. Is that parliamentary?
You're not allowed to call into question the veracity or the character of, but
isn't calling someone spineless doing that?
Well, what were we talking about? We were talking about visiting a bunch of white supremacists, a bunch of people who are advocating violence in Canadian society, who have published online, this has been well documented, published online very violent rhetoric. And this is stuff that Mr. Poilievre, we saw it in the convoy, we saw it on many other occasions where Mr. Poilievre goes up to these people and then when he's called on it, is refusing to apologize, refuses to back down.
I understand that you're voicing those concerns, but what you're telling Canadians here is that it's okay because you feel that it's justified for your party to call into question Mr. Poilievre's character in the House of Commons and characterize him as spineless, but for Mr. Poilievre to do the same for a reason he feels is justified, which you disagree, but for him to do the same and use the word wacko is not.
I would argue, Vassy, this is not about both sides. This is a new version of conservatives. This is not Brian Mulroney. This is not John Diefenbaker. This is not Robert Stanfield. We've reached a new level of violent, right-wing, extremist rhetoric. It's not okay to both sides it. It's not okay to normalize it.
It's not both sides.
It's not okay to normalize it. And the kind of discussion that we're having is actually quite incredible to me, that we would even accept that it is an acceptable thing to be advocating for these groups.
Who's saying it's acceptable? I said very plainly to you, Minister, with all due respect, those questions that you have asked about why he stopped there, I have posed them many times on this program.
And
the
other
Conservatives
places.
deserve questions about that. But the accusation being leveled at your party is that the Speaker is acting in a partisan way to protect, essentially, the Liberals, a party which he belongs to, but that he is not supposed to represent as Speaker of the House of Commons. The Prime Minister did call Mr. Poilievre spineless today.
There are rules in the House of Commons. We expect the Speaker, we urge the Speaker to apply the rules, apply them equally, apply them evenly. Stick to the timings, stick to the level of discourse. But you're seeing this repeatedly now, Vassy, where day after day, in fact, another Conservative member was asked to withdraw prior to Mr. Poilievre. They come in and they deliberately lay down this kind of language, deliberately promote this kind of violent rhetoric. When they get called on it, they protest vigorously and then claim to be victims when they are found in contravention of the rules.
So would you have used the word spineless? Like, was that something that, I'm not, again, taking away from how they have conducted themselves, but should your party also take that into account?
Saying someone that is lacking in principle.
No, spineless is the word that was used.
Saying, well, that's a synonym for lacking in principle. That does not call into question the very character of someone. Mr. Poilievre was invited to withdraw. He had 3 opportunities, by my count, to withdraw the unparliamentary term that the Speaker, in his wisdom, judged to be unparliamentary. But again, Vassy, this is just but one example of this level of discourse that Canadians, I think, need to take a close look at. People watching us, people who understood that Conservatives of the past had advocated for a certain series of policies. This is not that. This is something different. This is something much darker and much scarier. And we've reached a level, I would argue to you, where the level of violent rhetoric, extreme rhetoric, and populist right-wing rhetoric has become something in this country that we're not quite used to.
On the issue that kind of preceded, essentially, all of what did unfold, the issue of decriminalization in British Columbia, the genesis of the debate is over an exemption, essentially, that your government provided British Columbia, which kicked in at the end of last January. They have essentially asked for an amendment to that exemption to recriminalize the use of drugs in public spaces. Is your government in favor of granting that amendment?
We're in favor of keeping people alive so that they can be treated, to get the health care and the treatment that they need. Now, Mr. Eby, and whose government proactively asked for this measure, has now taken and assessed some of the evidence and some of the experiences that they've had. So obviously we're going to be paying close attention to what Premier Eby is asking for in terms of modifications or amendments to what has been put forward. Of course, we're going to work with the Premier of British Columbia as we would work with any Premier advocating for the same kinds of things.
But what is your party's stance on that? Because I did not hear a clear answer from the Prime Minister about whether or not you feel like this pilot project, which is also, potentially going to happen in certain parts of Toronto, for example, and other jurisdictions are looking at it, is something that you in principle support, or if you feel as though there will have to be significant modifications to ensure that it does do exactly what you laid out you're hoping to see, basically save people's lives.
This is part of federalism. No one is understating the extent of the problem of opioids and fentanyl in our communities. We're experiencing way too much of it. It is a problem that all levels of government need to be seized with. Our view is that it is an issue where we first need to ensure that people are okay, that they stay alive, and that they're able to access the treatment and the tools that are available to them.
Shouldn't that have been a guarantee before you provided that exemption? Shouldn't there have been more supports in place before you allowed for drugs to be decriminalized?
Well, what I just explained to you are the objectives. Those objectives continue to be the objectives. Premier Eby is advocating some changes with respect to the implementation of that. We're going to be working, of course, very clearly to that, and I can't imagine that at the end of the day, in a very short period of time, we will not be agreeing with Premier Eby on the right adjustments to be made.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Minister MacKinnon, I appreciate you making the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.